We are continuing this series that we've been in over the summer called Around the Table. And we're looking at different conversations that Jesus has around different tables, right? So sometimes there's a table where 4 people are there. Sometimes there's a table that we talked about a few weeks ago where 10,000 people were there. So the size of the table is not as important as the reason that Jesus invites us around the table. He invites us around the table for many reasons. Sometimes it's a moment of discipleship. Sometimes it's a moment of belonging. Sometimes it's an invitation to a conversation. Sometimes, as we're going to look at today, it's a confrontational table. It's a table that doesn't necessarily look like a table, but more like a mirror. That he holds up, he uses the table to hold up a mirror into our hearts, into our souls. And we're gonna look at this table that Jesus is invited to and that he has a conversation around in Luke chapter 11. So if you have a Bible, you can turn there. We're gonna get there in just a few minutes. If you don't have a Bible, it's no big deal. All the scriptures are gonna be on the screen. But this table really is about integrity. And I think integrity in our culture unfortunately, is a sliding scale. We see just literally a loss of integrity. And integrity is not just being honest. Integrity is not just about character. Integrity really, the meaning of the word integrity is to be integrated. It's to have an integration in your life. What is integrated? What people think about you and who you really are. That's really the bottom line of what integrity is. Integrity is this integration that your reputation matches your character. There's an integration. There's not a fragmentation. There's not a distance between who you are at work and who you are on Sundays. There's not a distance between how you treat your family and how you treat your coworkers. There's this integration in our life, and Jesus confronts a group of people in Luke chapter 11 that were not living with integrity. Their life was not integrated. And I think more than any other time in human history, we struggle with this because we have an opportunity every single day to publicly project an image, to publicly project a version of ourselves to other people who say that they're our friends or who claim to be our followers, and yet who we really are in our day-to-day life doesn't always match what we project to the outside world. We curate our social media profile and our platforms. We rehearse conversations in our mind before we actually have them. We tell people we're doing great or we're doing fine when our life is actually falling apart. We spend an enormous amount of time and an enormous amount of energy worrying about what other people think of us rather than who we are becoming. And what I would call that image management. And how I define image management, this is just my own personal definition, is caring more about what others think of me than who I am becoming. And we've become experts in our culture of image management. I want to manage, I want to curate, I want to control what you believe to be true about me, whether it's true about me or not. And it's really what it is, it's a misplaced identity. In December of 2015, my wife and I and our family, we were visiting her family in Chicago for Christmas. And we're sitting, if you've ever been to Chicago, you know there's this just miserable place to exist, and it's called I-80. It runs from Interstate 65 over to 294, and her family lives in Joliet, so there's like a 36-mile basically parking lot that we have to sit on every time we go to visit her family. And so we're sitting in traffic, and I get an email from my bank that says, not that I was checking my email while I'm driving. I wasn't driving, okay? We were parked. We were sitting in traffic, okay? But I get an email notification on my phone that says, your password has been changed. If you have not authorized this, please call customer service. And I look over at my wife, and I'm like, hey, did you change our banking password? She's like, no, I'm watching a Marvel movie. Why would I change our banking password? And I'm like, well, I just got an email. I wonder if it's spam. So I get on my Chase app and I open the app, and it will not, the Face ID doesn't work. And I try to enter the password, and it says password incorrect. So I immediately call customer service and I say, hey, I just got this notification that my password is, or that my password has changed. I'm just trying to figure out what's going on here. And they said, well, give us your email address. So I give them my email address. They say, there's no email address found for that account. I'm like, what do you mean? They're like, well, give us your social security number. So I give my social security number. They said, we don't have an account under your social security number. I said, what are you talking about? Like, well, there are the accounts there, but it's not connected to the email address that you just gave us. They said, hey, give us your password, your secret, words, the words that you would use, your emergency words. And so I started giving them all these emergency words, that try to do two-step verification. Like none of those emergency words match the email address. And they start reading off the 3 email addresses that are now associated with my account that I have no clue about. Well, you guys, over the next couple of days, a hacker from Bangladesh had broken into my Gmail, had stayed in my Gmail for several months, observing my patterns, broke into my iCloud, broke into my Apple ID, broke into my Gmail account, broke into all of my bank accounts, and began to systematically take my identity. Like I would get notifications that I had been locked out of Dropbox. I'd get notifications that my email address and my password had been changed for my Apple ID. My kids were sitting in school on their iPad in school when it started erasing because this guy from Bangladesh had gotten into everything. They took thousands of dollars out of our checking account, thousands of dollars out of our business account, thousands of dollars out of our savings account, and siphoned it into all of these other accounts. To my knowledge, as of today, this person had started 7 bank accounts and opened several credit cards in my name. And I was getting up in the middle of the night. I was setting alarms, getting up in the middle of the night, trying to get ahead of this person who was on a different time zone. So I was on the phone with Apple. I was on the phone with Dropbox. I was on the phone with Google trying to figure out how to get ahead of this person. And I'll never forget, it was kind of a all-time low for me. I'm on the phone at like 2:30 in the morning with this person at Apple, and she was going to change my password while he was sleeping so that I could try to get ahead of him because I would change my password. He would get notified that the password had been changed and would go in and actually deny the password change. And so I'm literally crying. I spent this is 3 months in. I'm spending 20 hours a week working on this. And I'm crying to this lady and I said, ma'am, I am the real Justin Davis. And she's like, well, I believe you, but I have no way to verify that you're the real Justin Davis. This went on so long. It took me about 6 or 7 months to actually get on the other side of this. And I got a letter from the US government identifying me as a victim of cyber terrorism and offering me resources through my own tax, money that I send to the government for counseling for the trauma I had experienced by having all my accounts hacked. Now, parenthetically, here's my best advice to you. Do not make your password Jordan 23, Jordan number 23, Air Jordan 23, Air Jordan number 23, okay? If you stay away from that, you're gonna be good, okay? I have since changed my password to Pippin number 33. I'm just joking. But it was just this unbelievable time of having my online identity completely hacked and stolen. Here's what I've learned in the 10 years or so since I got on the other side of this situation, is that it is so devastating to experience online identity theft, but I have repeatedly given up my spiritual identity over and over and over again. I have created versions of myself that don't match who I really am. I have pretended to be okay on the outside while I'm broken on the inside. And that's exactly what Jesus is going to be speaking to in Luke chapter 11, this misplaced identity. All of these people that Jesus is going to talk to, this group of religious leaders, had spent years cultivating their outward appearance. They'd spent years cultivating their reputation, convincing everyone they were spiritually mature. And everybody believed they were the real thing. They were the gold standard. They were the religious elite. And Jesus was the only one that could see 600,000 and 800,000 people as a part of the nation of Israel. There may have been more, but that's a conservative estimate, 600 to 800,000 people. And so in Jerusalem, there's going to be several people. And the priests were 1,000 direct reports. He oversaw all the others connected to the Roman government, because the Jewish people oppressed. And so the high priest wasn't necessarily liked by common, involved in that because civil dispute, and that's what we're going to see. That's the most common phrase that's used in the Gospels to describe Sadducees. Sadducees were a wealthy group of Jewish leaders that had political influence and religious clout, had financial wealth. And so they basically occupied the majority of the seats on the house. So that is a collection of the group of people that Jesus is getting ready to have lunch with. Okay, so let's pick up the story. So he went in and reclined at the table, cleaned the outside of the cup and dish, but inside you are full of greed and wickedness. You foolish people. Woe to you, Pharisees, because you love the most important seats. And they answered him, Teacher, when you say these things, you insult people down with the burdens they can hardly carry. And you, therefore, this generation will be held responsible for the blood of all the prophets that has been shed since the beginning of the world. From the blood of Abel to the blood of Zechariah and the sanctuary. Yes, I tell you, this generation will be held responsible. Pharisees and the teachers of the law began to oppose who were entering. When Jesus went outside, the Pharisees him fiercely and to besiege him with questions, waiting to catch him in something he might say. Now, I want you to see here, Jesus is not talking to people who are far from God. He's not talking to sinners. He's not talking to people Jesus goes hardest after. Heart transformation. And so that to be not just a table that we sit. Now we're going to kind of break it down through the New Living Translation. As Jesus was speaking, one of the Pharisees invited him home for a meal. So he went in and took his place at the table. His host was amazed to see that he washing ceremony required by Jewish custom. Then the Lord said to him, you Pharisees are so careful to clean the outside of the cup and dish, but inside you're filthy, full of greed and wickedness. Fools, didn't God make the inside as well and the outside? So clean the inside by giving gifts to the poor, and you'll be clean all over. Now, the Greek word that is used here in this passage for meal actually means lunch. So this isn't a big dinner. We talked a few weeks ago about this dinner that Jesus was invited to, where this lady shows up uninvited and unannounced. This is not that. This is a lunch. So it's not a formal dinner, but it's still a big deal for Jesus, a religious leader and teacher of the law, to be invited over to the home of a Pharisee. And what's even a bigger deal is we don't have time to get into it, but this is not the first time Jesus has confronted the religious leaders. In Luke chapter 5, in Luke chapter 7, in Luke chapter 10, he goes after them repeatedly. And Luke likes to highlight it. Luke mentions Jesus confronting religious leaders more than any other gospel writer. And so this guy is like, hey, thank you, sir. Can I have another? Like he just invites him over, to get more punishment, right? He's just like, hey, let's go at it again. And so when he gets to the lunch, the guy is appalled that Jesus will not wash his hands. Now, the word that he uses for wash there is the Greek word baptismo. It's where we get the word baptism. And so this was not about just washing your hands because they're dirty. There was obviously a ritual for that. There was a need for that. This was the belief system by the Jewish people that the world is contaminated and the world is corrupt. And so a traditional Jewish person, when they walked into the home of a religious leader, would wash their hands, almost washing the dirt of the world off of them. And this guy is amazed, the New Living Translation says, astonished, the NIV says, that Jesus ignores that tradition. Any Jewish leader, any Jewish religious leader would know of that tradition and would typically honor that tradition. And so it's a blatant act of rebellion in the religious leader's mind that Jesus doesn't do this. And so he doesn't confront Jesus verbally, what he's thinking about it, right? He's processing it, and Jesus reads his mind. And he's offended, but Jesus does not defend his behavior. He uses this choice to not engage in this custom, to challenge and expose the hearts of the religious leaders at the table. Now, imagine that you have somebody that you invite over for dinner, and after dinner, you say, hey, would you like a cup of coffee with dessert? So you have this dessert prepared, you're gonna make some coffee, and so you start pouring the coffee, and the cups that you're gonna serve the coffee in, they're special to you. Like you only use them for guests, that are, it's important guests, or, it's somebody that you love. They're heirlooms, they're valuable, they're, china that you got at your wedding. If people even get china now, I don't know. We were poor, so nobody ever bought us china at our wedding. I feel gypped 31 years later, all right? Nobody in our family had the money to even pass down china, okay? The china we got was things made in China, and that was from Target, okay? And so anyway, I digress. I don't even know where I'm at. Okay, so you got this amazing coffee that the coffee cup that you're passing around. You hand them the coffee, and the coffee is cold, and it's got mold floating on top of it. It doesn't matter how impressive the coffee cup is if what is in the coffee cup is moldy, cold, and undrinkable. And Jesus is saying to the religious leaders, that is your soul. That is what your soul looks like. You spend so much time curating the outside, curating your appearance, curating what other people think of you, trying to manage. You don't even take time to look at the inside of the cup. Jesus says, hey, you're obsessed with managing what everybody can see, but you're ignoring what God sees. And other times in the Gospels, we see this pattern of the religious leaders. They go to the temple and pray, and they pray really loud so everybody can hear how spiritual they were. They go to the temple and give, and they give all of their tithes and offering in coins because there's metal coffers that receive the offering. And so they throw all these coins in there so that makes a lot of noise so all the people know just how much they're giving. And I think we do the same thing. We have this outside persona that doesn't match the inside of our heart. So we fake our joy, we fake our contentment, we fake our spiritual growth, we fake our financial peace, we fake our relational health, we fake our marital happiness because we believe that as long as people think that we're doing okay, then we're actually doing okay. And what happens is style becomes more important than substance. And that's what image management does to us. Jesus did not say, woe to you Pharisees because you're broken. He says, woe to you Pharisees and you teachers of the law because you won't admit you're broken. The second thing we see here is that image management, it values performance over transformation. It values performance over transformation. Look at verse 42. What sorrow awaits you Pharisees, for you are careful to tithe even the tiniest income from your herb gardens, but you ignore justice and the love of God. You should tithe, yes, but do not neglect the more important things. These religious leaders followed the letter of the law. The NIV version says that they were tithing on mint. Anybody ever buy mint at Kroger or Meijer? It's a very small plant, right? They were tearing off leaves of mint, up to 10, and then setting aside one for every 10 leaves of mint. They were meticulous when it came to observing the law, and yet their hearts were not changed. They followed the letter of the law, yet they completely missed loving others. They completely missed being merciful. They completely missed noticing and responding to injustice. And it just brought me to this place this week. And part of it's because of the culture that we're in right now. And part of it is, I think, because of some of the things that I think that the American church is struggling with. But I just started asking these questions. What good does it do to follow the letter of the law on immigration if we don't love the immigrant? What good does it do to pray for revival in the church if we're unwilling to forgive someone who's hurt us? What good does it do to believe in the sanctity of life and fight for the unborn if we don't care for vulnerable children after they're born? What good does it do to attend church every Sunday and ignore lonely people that sit right next to us? What good does it do to have all the right convictions if we don't share the love of God with people that are hurting next to us? It's like we stack up all of our religious beliefs and think that's going to change the world. Your religious beliefs and your convictions will not change the world. They help guide you as you demonstrate the love of Christ. And so saying that you have better theology than someone who's far from God is not going to transform their theology. Living out the love of God through your theology is the only thing that's transformational. Jesus says that Paul says that it's God's kindness that leads us to repentance, right? And so you can have all of the right beliefs. And if you don't have the love of God, Paul says it again, you're like a clanging cymbal. You're like this white noise that doesn't have any influence with people who are far from God. I grew up believing that following the rules was the same as following Jesus. But there's a huge difference between following the rules and following Christ. The Pharisees believed that their religious performance was their key. It was their ticket. It was their identifier as people who are close to God. Jesus says, hey, I don't value performance. I value transformation. Next, we see values, image management values status over serving. Status over serving. Look at verse 43. What sorrow awaits you, Pharisees, for you love to sit in the seats of honor in the synagogue and receive respectful greetings as you walk in the marketplaces. Yes, what sorrow awaits you. For you're like hidden graves in a field. People walk over them without even knowing the corruption they're standing on. Teacher, said the expert of the religious law, you've insulted us too in what you just said. Yes, said Jesus, what sorrow awaits you, experts in religious law, for you crush people with unbearable religious demands and you never lift a finger to ease the burden. Now, seats in this culture were a huge deal. Seats at the table, seats in the synagogue, where you sat mattered. Okay? In fact, nobody wants to sit in the front, right? There ain't nobody in the first two rows of this place, all right? I get it. Behavior can be good if your motives are misguided. Recognition, influence, and Jesus says, hey, you don't really, we pursue influence, but he says this, he says, you crush people that religion puts on us. That's what Jesus, more, and Jesus says, hey, my yoke is easy. Forget there's experiencing the love of Christ. Isn't the darkness of this world. Resisted truth, verse 47. They blocked people from God, verse 52. He lives in Nashville and he just graduated person. This last week, he texted and he said this. He said, well, I checked out the Royce report and he's not out the Royce report and he's not on there. Now, for those of you that don't know what the tells you the type of religious system we're living in. Like his measuring stick for wanting to know if this pastor was okay to listen to online is he in the Royce report? I look at the American church and I see so many similarities of they corrupted people, they burdened people, they resisted truth, they blocked people from God. And as parents, as coworkers, as spouses, as siblings, as boyfriend or girlfriends, whatever stage of life you find yourself in, are we making it easier for people to experience Christ? Or are we making it harder? See, the people entrusted with helping others know God were actually making it harder. The religious leaders, they became experts at pretending to be closer to God than they really were. And maybe today you're pretending you're okay and you're not okay. Maybe today you're pretending your marriage is healthy and it's not healthy. Maybe today you're pretending you're not exhausted and you're really exhausted. Maybe you're pretending you're not lonely and you feel so much isolation. Maybe today you're pretending you're close to God, but there's not an integration. There's a gap between where your relationship with God is and where you pretend it is. Can I just say, Jesus never said, don't come to me if you're broken. He never said, don't come to me if you're tired. He never said, don't come to me if you don't have all the answers. He never said, don't come to me if your marriage is a mess. He never said, woe to you who are broken, tired, or hurting. He said, woe to you who pretend like you're not tired, you're not broken, you're not hurting. See, God can change who we are. He can't change who we pretend to be. He only transforms the parts of our heart that we're willing to bring to him. And so this passage is known as the 6 woes. It's actually what I believe to be the 6 invitations. It's an invitation to us. God, am I really cleaning the inside of the cup? See, Jesus turns this lunch table into a mirror. Take you as you are, but I can't take you as you pretend to be.